Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This beautiful Tuesday at 1 o'clock here in the C.L. and Connolly Council Chambers, 4th floor of the Cuyahoga County Administration Building. See a lot of smiling faces out there. Roll call, please.
Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Ms. Baker. Ms. Baker is absent. Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Brady.
Here.
Ms. Conwell. Here. There's a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Councilman Miller is in attendance.
Welcome, Mr. Miller. Is there public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Thank you. In your packets, we have the minutes of April 3rd's meeting. If they're in order, I'll accept the motion.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you. 2018-0111 and 2018-0112 as to the request of our friend from Juvenile Court, Ms. Lippman.
Resolution number 2018-0111, authorizing an amendment to contract number CE 1700127 with Ohio Guidestone for community-based treatment center management services for the period 7/1/2017 through 6/30/2018 to extend the time period to 6/30/2019, to change the scope of services effective 7/1/2018 and for additional funds. And resolution number 2018-0112, authorizing an amendment to contract number CE 1700360 with Applewood Centers for secure residential treatment services for the period 1/1/2018 through 6/30/2018 to extend the time period to 6/30/2019 and for additional funds.
Good afternoon, Karen Lippman with Juvenile Court. Always a pleasure to be here. Today we have two residential contracts. These are part of our targeted reclaim program, which is part of the overall reclaim program of money that we get from the state of Ohio. The targeted reclaim program specifically is set up to divert youth from being sent to the Department of Youth Services. So all the youth that go to these two facilities are going to be felony level youth, and they're all boys, no girls. So for the first one that's with Ohio Guidestone, this is a continuation of that program. There's 12 beds there. We do a pretty good job of keeping it full all the time. So we're diverting those kids from the Department of Youth Services. And then the second one is one that we just added on recently. It just started in January of this year. And it also is just a local provider that has about 3 beds for boys as well to provide them services and treatment and keep them from going to the Ohio Department of Youth Services. And I can take any questions.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Lippman, did you say the one has only 3 beds, which?
Yeah, the Applewood program we started, it has, the Guidestone program has 12 dedicated beds. The Applewood program is a little bit more, flexible, but has 3 or 4 beds, so it's really as we sort of need it. I don't think would go over maybe 5 or 6 beds at any given time. We try to keep the Ohio Guidestone one full because we do have the 12 dedicated beds and it is a lower per diem. But the Applewood one has, I think we have maybe 3 youth that are there actually, like currently.
So why is it that one has 12 beds and one has 3 beds, but the difference in the amount of money requested is not that much different? Is the Applewood one 3 times as expensive, and if so, why is that?
So the Ohio Guidestone one has 12 beds that we try to keep full all the time. Their per diem right now is about $90 a day less expensive. So that makes up some of the difference. The Applewood one, which is obviously the more expensive bed, also has a longer length of stay for the youth. So and we're the Ohio Guidestone one, we try to keep all 12 of those beds full for as much of the year as possible. Obviously, when one youth comes out, there might be a lag before getting the next youth in. The Applewood one, we're really only dedicated to have one bed full at all time. So right now, we have, I believe, 3 youth in there. We can go down to 1 youth in there, so it would be less money, even though their per diem is higher.
So, the Applewood one only has 3 beds typically, and sometimes not even the 3 are filled. They're not as consistently in use as the Ohio Guidestone one. I'm having a hard time seeing how you get to $952,000. That's a lot of money for.
Well, because it can flex up to much higher, and it is, like I said, $90 a day more expensive. But all of this money is the targeted reclaim dollars, so if we don't use it, it stays within the grant and rolls over from year to year. So we still only pay for those beds that we utilize, except for in the Ohio Guidestone program, we're dedicated to use 1 bed. So even if that bed, and I believe it's a modified per diem, but even if that bed is, if there's nobody in the program, we still have to pay for 1 bed at Applewood. At Ohio Guidestone, we do not.
And my final question is, and I know it would not be within the reclaim program, but are there similar programs available for youth that are troubled and have come from disadvantaged backgrounds, but haven't gotten themselves a felony, or do you kind of need to get yourself in trouble before this kind of service becomes available?
So within the court's regular residential array of services, we have a number of facilities that will take any youth, whether they're unruly, a misdemeanor, or a felon. But as sort of a standard operating procedure, we try community-based services first with youth, regardless of what their offense level is, because it's always best to keep the youth in the community and provide those services for them while they're still at home. So the youth that do go to residential services, if you look at their history, 9 times out of 10, or even probably even more than that, you're going to see sort of a whole history of community-based services that were tried and for one reason or another did not succeed. Because the truth of the matter is, if we can send a youth to residential facility, they're still going to come home. So unless you address those programs, the issues that are going on while that youth is home, you're just sort of, kicking the ball down the field. So, so the youth that do go to residential, that component with the family is always an important component because you have to really prepare that youth to come home and be successful when they do come home.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Through the chair to Karen, on Councilman Miller's point, you stated it must pay for at least 1 bed, even if we don't use for Applewood. What is the length of, what is that, on a monthly basis or?
Every day. We pay for the empty beds, yeah. So that was one of the provisions that Applewood really sort of insisted on in moving forward with this program.
Do we need Applewood?
Well, right now with the reclaim formula, which is pretty complicated, where you're in competition with all the other counties in the state. So, for example, moving forward into the next state fiscal year, which starts in July, the court is getting 0 reclaim dollars based on that formula. So it's important that we divert as many youth as, makes sense from being sent to the Department of Youth Services, because those bed days that they're utilizing is part of that formula. So we also have targeted reclaim dollars that we're carrying over from year to year, and we want to utilize those dollars. So we rather use the targeted reclaim dollars than to send the youth through our traditional reclaim program, or traditional residential program and utilize, because those are HHS dollars. So it's also, by having this program, it's a way to provide youth that need residential services from not going to DYS, but also from not using the HHS dollars for those services.
So each child's stay is on a case-by-case basis.
It is. I know that the Guidestone program, because it's called a community-based treatment center, it has sort of a protocol, so those youth are maybe 4 or 5 months in the program. I don't know the length of stay of the Applewood youth, but like I said, the first youth only went into that program, I'm going to say like February 1st. So we're, really only almost 4 months in. So we don't really have an average length of stay because we're just sort of in the beginning of that program. But but both of these are based in sort of an evidence-based program format as far as what they're getting. So
And what's the year? Does it go from 20?
the contract year, it's
In
on the
terms
state fiscal year. So usually they're July to June. The Applewood one, we started the contract started in January, so the first youth went in right around the 1st of February, or maybe a little bit earlier. So that has only 6 months contract history by the end of June.
And how many days were not utilized at Applewood?
Top of my head,
Or
I
from-
want to say maybe, and this is when we were doing our program startup, maybe 20.
So those are not our dollars, but they're still
Right.
federal dollars, correct?
No, these are state dollars, but
State.
actually, we didn't use the state dollars. This is from memory, so I'd have to check. But I believe we are not using the state dollars for those empty beds. Believe we're using Title 4E dollars for those, because I don't think the state wants to have their money for those placeholder beds either.
Still using some
We're still using some
taxpayer-
dollars,
some
right?
taxpayer
So
dollars somewhere.
we stay on top of the programming people pretty closely so that there's at least one youth in there.
And so we need to figure out a way of how we decline that. Are we following the child once they're returned back home?
Yes, absolutely. So all youth that are in residential, whether they're in one of these programs or in our traditional residential programs, have a probation officer, we call them placement aftercare workers, and they are with the youth from the time they enter the residential facility, and then afterwards, when they get back home, to help get them, so they're sort of on typical like probation after they get out.
So I'm concerned about the days, the 20 days that we weren't able to have somebody in. Is that when you do your report with the federal government, do you think that's any
Well,
questions from them about that?
I don't think that it was the beginning of the program. It was really the startup. There hasn't been an issue since. We in my unit, we kept saying, hey, there's no kids, there's no youth, and then we got kids in there as quickly as we could. I don't think moving forward it will be an issue. I think it was more of a startup issue, but we continue to monitor it every single month so that, if it gets down to like one youth is in there, that, hey, you better start looking for that next youth to come in because this one youth is going to be coming out soon. Because we only are required to have one youth in there minimum.
Thank you.
Anything further? Timeline on this?
July 1st start. So I will go back to you. You can skip the reading or not. We are well in advance.
Which is unusual. I'm at a loss here. Not your fault, always. I don't know, I think if the committee's comfortable moving forward, I could go either way, depending on what you guys want to do. Doesn't matter. So why don't we, I'll accept the motion for Resolution 2018-0111 and Resolution 2018-0112 as they're existing for second reading under emergency suspension at the next council meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good seeing you. We'll be seeing you in 2 weeks. Janine, is that
Yes.
2 weeks?
Is that 2 weeks? The 5th.
We'll be getting a update on
Yes.
the Juvenile Justice Center's jail
Right.
and anything else that you might
And some
wanna-
other fun things.
And
And you'll
some
get to
oth-
meet the new detention director who just started like maybe a week ago.
Okay,
So, and I'm going to bring all my friends.
okay. And we might have a few
Mail.
fun things of our own for you, too.
Always look forward to it.
Okay.
All right,
You have a
thank you.
good day. Tell our friends we said hello. Don't be a stranger. On discussion items, we're going to move the B, which is Juvenile Justice Center. That's the Juvenile Justice Center and Intervention Center. Oh, is that new?
That's one of the fun things.
Oh, so it's not official or it's official?
It's in planning.
It's in planning, but it's in writing, so evidently it's real. That will be moved to in 2 weeks, Tuesday at 1 o'clock, if everybody's okay with that. Second is our medical unit, county jail, Mr. Mills. Welcome, Mr. Mills. Reason I scheduled this was there was a quote-unquote mission-critical request on nurses at the Board of Control not long ago, which was kicked to committee today. And I appreciate the members of the Board of Control doing that. I think this is the proper place for that. I'm a little concerned that it got to a mission-critical situation, and I would like for you to explain how we had gotten to that point. And if you could go through where we're at with the medical in the jail proper itself and our satellites in Bedford and in Euclid as to where we're at. Any concerns and questions that you might have for us regarding those and concerns going forward that you have that we could possibly be helpful with those concerns for you.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. I'm Ken Mills, the Director of Regional Corrections. With the jail project of opening Bedford Heights, HR had made offers to RNs to come on board, and for various reasons, a couple weeks before we opened, they wound up all of them declining at the end, which put us in a bind for having medical at Bedford Heights been able to transfer to put inmates out there.
Okay, I don't want to interrupt you, I want you to go, but various reasons is,
Pay, and just they didn't want to, they got other jobs, et cetera.
okay. And on the pay issue specifically, because I know that's a sticking point, Bedford was in the pipeline for quite a while. And, we had the grand opening, but we had issues with nursing over there. Did that just come up? Did the pay just come up, or have we been dealing with this all along?
The pay's been an issue for a while,
Have we dealt with that?
and they're in the process. We've been trying to deal with it. HR is doing analysis now and looking at doing the increase to the wages. So
But
that's being
Bedford's
looked
been
at.
open how long?
Bedford's been open since April 6th.
And we've been somewhat understaffed at the main jail for how long?
I don't know about the staffing. Yeah, it's been a while. They've been understaffed.
Okay, and we're just looking into that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
So anyway, we had the gap, so we needed to have it open for we started taking Cleveland's fresh arrest on the 14th. And that's where it became critical for us. We had to have the capacity to start taking the fresh arrest. So what we've done is the current funding for the nurses provides about 5 weeks worth of coverage out at Bedford Heights. HR has made offers. We have accepted offers to, as of yesterday, I believe it was still at 7 OPNs and 5 RNs, which will cover that. And their start date is May 29th or June 11th if they can't get the onboarding process completed, like their background checks back in time. So hopefully this will fill that gap. We've reposted for the RNs for the vacancies downtown and for the LPNs coming in to start the process again to get the staffing level to where it needs to be. In the meantime, the sheriff's fiscal is putting a contract through the normal process, the full approval process, to be able to have an open contract. So if we need to support those places that we have, we can draw on it and staff our nursing downtown or wherever we need to support operations.
What's the actual price for new nurses across the board? Is it $1 an hour? Is it $20 an hour? Where are we at that we seemingly are below market?
That I can't answer that. Do we, Donna, do you have the?
Sure.
Yeah.
Currently, industry standard for an RN is about $38 an hour. We, at our top pay $31 an hour. And then industry standard for an RN's $27 an hour. I mean, I prefer an LPN. And we currently pay about $21 an hour. So there's about a $6 difference in the LPNs and about a $7 difference in RNs.
And this has been standard throughout with our hiring at the jail with RNs and LPNs.
Wait, so my understanding is one of our problems has been that we don't pay up to industry standards. That's one of the problems of why the turnover, because we do lose nurses once they come on board. Like they'll come on board maybe fresh out of school and then they may leave us for a better paying job, things like that.
So this is a historic problem. And certainly should be a historic concern that we're just dealing with now. And I'm not really looking to place blame, but I'm just wondering why, historically, if we've been below market, knowing that we had the amount of inmates that we have, and now expanding and trying to market our product, which will be to save cities, communities money by taking their prisoners and taking care of them. I would imagine part of our marketing is that we're going to take care of them at or above the services that you provided. How can we be out there asking communities to participate in a regional program when we are not ready? And I'll ask the director of jails that.
When we get these nurses coming in full-time, we've kind of, in medical's here, so you can answer, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding is we've patched the hemorrhaging of the nursing situation till we get some more in. You're absolutely right. We need to have the people in. We need to give medical care out. We need to be able to staff to manage what the need and the people coming in.
See, the concern that I have, and I'll let my colleagues express their concerns. The concern that I have is, and again, this is historical. The problems that we've had at the jail were historical. We came in, we thought we cleaned it up with the advance of and the graciousness of Metro to come on board. And I know some people aren't all in with that. We are, and I think that's the most important thing, is that we are. I just wonder. Well, you say that we're past that critical time. Are you talking about that we've just finally okayed for nurses to be paid at standard at the going standard rate?
That
I understand
process,
that's in the pipe.
when I say I'm talking about the people on board, with this group coming on board, we should be staffed at a level to where we can handle it till we bring more people on. Yes, we do need to look at the recruiting initiatives. Yes, we do need to make some changes. And that's ongoing, trying to make sure that we're providing people with the right incentives and packages and to get the right people on board.
Who does our recruiting?
Talent acquisitions.
Okay, they're clearly not doing a good job. Wouldn't it be wise to have Metro do that for us? And really, wouldn't it be wise to have Metro come in and run this show? Because when I hear the words mission critical, nursing staff, Board of Control needs to be done, I get very concerned that the ball has been dropped. And I don't think we're in a position going historically back to the concerns that some of those that have been jailed that have run into unfortunate situations that have cost this county multiple millions of dollars. We want to avoid that, and we have been avoiding that ever since Metro came on board. Wouldn't that be a wise way to go, or no?
I can't answer that question. The medical doesn't work for me, so I mean,
No,
I'd have
from
to-
your opinion, you're the
My
director.
opinion is I believe we actually discussed it with them about doing it. I'm for, as a director, I'm for any option that gets the staff there that I can have the medical care.
Okay.
I mean, that's my answer to that question. I'm for any option that brings in the people to provide the care I need. Because I'm operationally on the security side, I need to move forward.
All right. Questions? Mr. Brady?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First question, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time looking back, but need to really understand how we got in a position other than what you've said already, unless somebody else is in a better position to answer the question. Who's in charge? I mean, how in the world did we get into a place where we have to come in and ask for an emergency allocation for something that we've known for months and months and months that we were going to do? I mean, how do we go out and sell this idea to people? It doesn't appear like we know that we've got a good game plan here or that we know what we're doing. And what happened? Who's in charge? Who was in charge of making sure these nurses were ready for this jail?
I mean, I'd have to defer that to Chief Taylor.
Well, then
And, I mean,
I'll have to hear from Chief Taylor.
Good afternoon, George Taylor, Chief Deputy at the Sheriff's Department. Basically, I became aware of this late December, early January, once the budget process was done. And probably mid-January, I was given the overall budget for medical at Bedford Heights. And I was informed then that I needed to budget for different positions, equipment, so on and so forth. At which point, I sat down with the medical staff, came up with a compromised budget, and then that budget was presented to the jail director Mills, who approved it, and then we started trying to fill those positions, which would have been probably early February, middle February.
Do I understand this correctly, that it seems to me that you were given an inadequate budget to do what needed to be done? Is that fair to say, or is that not fair?
The budget we worked with was a budget that had been allocated on the general budget.
What was the basis for the numbers of the budget in the first place? Were you involved in determining, or whoever should have been, some professional, somebody who knows about this? Who was involved in determining what the level of resources were that would be needed to do this?
I was not involved in getting the overall number. It was given to me by Director Mills in the budget that he had set up for Bedford Heights.
And how did you determine that budget, Mr. Mills? Excuse me, sir.
the budget for medical came up with meetings with Metro Health and the medical director and everybody about what we would need to do it.
And so you and who made this decision about this budget? Was it adequate? Did it turn out to be adequate?
Yes.
It did turn
This
out.
isn't a budget issue as far as the nurses out there. The money's there for them, it's the being able to recruit them to come on board.
All right. So now you're both still here. Now we're back in January, February, whatever. We know we've got to have nurses. How did we end up several months later being in a position like this?
HR attempted to fill those positions. At one point, we thought we had enough nurses to make this work, not as many as we needed, but we thought we had enough to make it work. And for various reasons, those nurses all turned down the positions, which left us where we started at. And very close to the time that Bedford Heights was going to open.
Okay, well, I know this is difficult work, but I do expect advanced planning to be part of it. And, I'm not impressed with the fact that that occurred at the level that it needed to, and I find this very frustrating. I'm looking for, going forward, which I'm sure you are, all of you, a fix for this. We can't live this way. We can't do business this way. We certainly can't put ourselves out as someone who's offering a service and not be able to offer it. And the council needs to be a part of this instead of being in a position of having to come in at the end and clean it up. So that's all for right now.
Okay, and Mr. Taylor, when you say for various reasons, that was money.
Basically, yes, that and nurses aren't necessarily overjoyed about working in a jail.
Which is why you'd probably have to pay over market just to get the quality that you need.
Yes.
And quantity.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Miller.
I'm following on the same line as the chairman, and I know I probably sound like Jack Schron on this one, but it takes a lot of money to bring on new people and then deal with the constant turnover. I think he says something like a half a year's salary for every time you have to go through the process and replace somebody, and so we could maybe do better and not spend any more money just paying them what we're supposed to be paying them. And so my question is whether we're have any plan to do some kind of a market rate study or Archer study or something like that, and determine what the proper pay level should be and be set it.
Yes, sir, I believe that's what's going on. HR now is conducting that, and that's the phase they're at.
And do you have a time frame on when we would be ready to implement that?
I don't.
There's a lot of different variables at play when it comes to that, some of which are out of our hands, but we're trying to push it along as quickly as we can and efficiently as we can.
Okay, so could you confer with the various parties that have input on that and get back to us and let us know what the timeline is?
As best we can, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm sorry, is there anybody else that has anything right now? Oh, yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Just to follow up, why did the nurses turn down the positions? Did anyone ask, since all of them turned down the position?
One of them, I know for a fact, sent a written reasoning why they didn't take the position, and the main reason in that was the pay or lack thereof.
Did anyone notify HR that the pay was inadequate? And who did you talk to in HR?
That notification was sent to HR from the individual that turned down the job, so they were aware of it.
Did anybody from your departments notify HR? If we're having a shortage because of a pay discrepancy or inadequate pay, I would imagine the next step would be for the folks that are running the jails to go to HR and say, hey, we've got a problem.
Yes, we went to them, and that's what got some of this process started on reviewing the wages.
Actually, no, that's not true, because I was part of getting that moved, because I got a phone call because the mission critical came up before mission critical.
Okay, I was not
And
aware.
our office got involved. I'm just telling you, you wouldn't know that. But then things seemingly were moving along. I'm just now concerned why, if we had a problem and we knew what the problem is, why didn't we deal with the problem
We're attempting to deal with it.
now?
We were even attempting to deal with, well, now, yes, ever since the first of the year or thereabouts, when we became aware that this was going to be the problem that it is, which didn't give us a lot of time to deal with the problem. Had we been dealing with this a year and a half ago, we may not be standing here today.
That's obvious. What's the relationship, do you think, in your opinion, Mr. Mills, with the medical staff and the sheriff's office in the county?
My opinion of it?
Yeah.
It's good. I mean, they're working with us out of Bedford Heights. They went out and set it up. It's working.
Are they happy?
Metro Health?
No, the folks that are working in the jail, the RNs, the LPNs, medical staff, the doctors, the chief medical, do they have concerns, and do they express those concerns with you?
Regarding,
Uh,
I mean, they seem.
Pay inequities,
No, they don't
understat, you know,
They don't-
I
they
can
don't
tell you
share
when,
that with me, Councilman.
if somebody's making $38 an hour at the Cleveland Clinic, and I'm making 31 at the Cuyahoga County Jail, just the atmosphere alone dictates that I'm making more than 38 an hour. And if I was in your position, and I can only presume, what I would do is that I would go to HR and say, we've got a problem, we've got to go to whatever the number is to get qualified folks interested in coming here. And we have other incentives in Cuyahoga County, starting with the PERS and some of our benefits that I think are very attractive. So even though the job may not be super attractive, there are other things that attract good people. But it seems the dollar figure is the holdup, and it was a year and a half ago, and we're just hearing about it now. Do you understand my concerns?
Yes, sir, I understand your concerns, but this has been talked about, and again, I'm not directly related to that, so they don't come to me and talk, they go through their chain of command. But I can tell you, and without getting specific, we've talked about this for quite a while, trying to get it raised up and to figure out a way to fix the problem. I know those discussions.
If you've been doing that, you hit a roadblock. What was the roadblock? Or, more directly, who was the roadblock? And if you don't tell me who the roadblock is or what the roadblock is, then you're the roadblock. Now, who is it?
I don't know. I mean, I'll give you
So
an honest
somebody
answer,
told you,
Councilman. I'm not sure.
you put it into the system, and it stopped a year and a half ago to the point where we came to a situation that was mission critical. Somebody stopped it. The department stopped it, an individual stopped it. Somebody, I would assume above you, stopped that. Who, what did that? If you're
honestly
not
can't
willing
answer
to
that.
answer, that's fine,
Yeah.
because I'll find out. Okay. So you think the relationship with the staff is okay?
Yes.
Now, I know Dr. Tallman was going to be here, couldn't be here, he's at a conference. Is there anybody here that was sent in Dr. Tallman's stead? Is there anyone? No, directly from the jail?
Yes, actually, our nurse supervisor is here.
Oh, okay. And who might that be?
So my name is Jane Platt, and I'm the Chief of Staff at Metro Health, and Gary Brack is here. He's our nursing supervisor.
Yeah, Gary
Brack.
Oh, Gary Brack.
Yeah.
Gary, my question to you is the question to the director. What is the relationship as far as the medical staff and the Sheriff's Department of Cuyahoga County?
It's very tumultuous. The Metro Health staff, which runs medical operations for the jail, we have a great relationship with Sheriff Pinckney, with the chief. Ken Mills is kind of the obstruction in this whole process.
What do you mean by that?
So I have copies for everybody, but we have multiple hiring requests that were signed off by the sheriff several years ago. The sheriff had approved these positions. Ken Mills had the positions contacted. I don't know if it was OBM or who he contacted, but the positions never went through, so we could never hire. There was a comment by Director Mills stating that talent acquisition is the problem at the jail. It's not. We have candidates when we get the positions approved. I have multiple emails from Dr. Tallman. We've been requesting staff for a long time. It's clearly evident to us that there's been a nursing crisis at the jail. The pay is definitely a factor with recruiting nurses to the jail. However, the relationship that we have with Mills is, Metro Health is constantly left out of the planning. We had no knowledge of prior to Bedford, prior to Euclid. Most of the meetings that were held with Metro Health, we requested those through Brian Soleil or the chief. There seems to be, it's almost a form of like passive aggressive behavior. What the director tells us is not kind of what pans out. The hiring requests we have for Euclid, those still haven't been filled. We've had 6 vacancies at the county, at the main jail, which we still don't have. And they're onboarding for May 29th. We have 2 RNs and 2 LPNs. They're tentatively scheduled. Really still no staff for Bedford or Euclid at all.
I'm not, again, like Mr. Brady said, I don't want to go back, I don't want to point fingers, but I want to find out where the problem lies. And it may not just be Mr. Mills, it may be, I don't know, we'll get to the bottom of that. But our hiring practices here in the county are archaic at best.
Sure.
Things go into HR, and 6 months later, maybe if you're lucky, you'll get that employee. I understand some of the particulars that have to happen with new hires, but I think we're way behind hiring people, good people, especially when we're in situations like you. The concern, there's a couple concerns with what you've testified here to, the relationship with Mr. Mills, and that, again, we'll deal with, and I think maybe better deal with somewhere else. But my concern is the dollar figure, and you're saying it's not necessarily a dollar figure, that's part of the problem?
It is a big part. So when the positions are posted, when we do get candidates that come down to the jail, a good majority of the applicants do turn the position down because of the salary, because we are not competitive with the going rates. Our numbers that we're allowed to hire kind of seem to constantly change. We're told that we can hire this many, and then we find out that those positions aren't available anymore. There's just, I think going forward, it would be great to have just more open communication. We're kind of excluded from meetings. We're excluded from the high-level decision-making that we should be included in. Specifically, Dr. Tallman, who's the medical director, is kind of told what to do by Ken Mills, where it should be the medical director from Metro Health should be making these decisions as they affect the inmate's health. Dr. Tallman should be setting the standards of what he deems appropriate for staffing. And there's kind of this, sometimes we're told that, Ken Mills runs the jail, but then sometimes we're told, no, the chief, you guys report to the chief, but then there's kind of this interjection throughout. So it's really kind of it's a difficult situation to be in for Metro Health.
And do you think I'm far off in suggesting that maybe we negotiate openly with Metro Health to just take this operation over? Because,
If it's okay.
Sure.
and if you can't answer,
Jake
this.
can speak better on that.
I'd actually, if you don't mind, Councilman Gallagher, I'd like to answer that question. First, I want to just make it clear that the contractual relationship that Metro Health has with Cuyahoga County stipulates that our relationship is with the sheriff. So when we talk about operations and budget, planning for services, expansion of services, the conversations happen at the level of Sheriff Pinckney and George Taylor, Chief Taylor. Very rarely have we been involved in direct conversations with Director Mills. It's contractually set up that way. We hire the staff we hire all of the staff with the exception of the nurses. I'm talking about clinical staff. The responsibility for the hiring of the nurses lies directly on the shoulders of Cuyahoga County. We don't hire them. We don't manage the hiring process. We participate in the process by assisting with interviews and assessing candidates. In terms of recommendations for staffing levels for nurses and for the main jail, excuse me, and for Euclid and Bedford, we have submitted recommendations for staffing in the past, as well as most recently for Bedford. Often those recommendations have been denied because there's a conversation of, are we overstaffing a medical clinic for a correction facility or not? So we've gotten through those. The recommendation that we made specifically for Bedford was denied, I understand, by Ken Mills. It was budgetary, potentially. I don't recall the specific response. When Chief Taylor then took over the process in January, and we discussed the recommendation that Metro Health, as the medical director for the facility, made, Chief Taylor approved the budget and moved it forward. So there was at that point a level of comfort for us that we could execute our responsibilities as medical director with an agreed upon appropriate medical staffing. So we have been in conversation, our lawyers and the county's lawyers have been in conversations about amendments for Bedford most recently. Those amendments cover a few items. One, it puts us, Metro Health, under the umbrella of, or puts actually Bedford under the umbrella of the main contract, which at this point includes Maine, Jail, and Euclid. We then have responsibility to be medical director now for Bedford. It includes liability insurance that we cover. And it also has a budget attached to one of those amendments that includes a half of an FTE for an additional medical provider, a doctor. And it also includes medical supplies and everything we need for the clinic. And it also includes prescriptions and medicines. So I think we're very close to getting those amendments agreed upon with the county executive's office, legal department, where those would then come before you. We also built in one of those amendments a staffing level scale so that if the county is unable to hire nurses to staff Bedford for a population of a certain number of inmates, we will not provide the medical director services there. We want to make sure that before we take that responsibility, there is appropriate legal levels of medical staff out there. And I say that because the staff at Bedford will almost 100%, with the exception, I believe, of half of an FTE, be nursing. So it's county nurses that are going to be out there. So that's where we're at right now with Bedford. Maine Jail has chronically had vacancies. We had conversations with county staff multiple times requesting additional nursing for the county Maine Jail medical clinic. The amount of money, the disparity between what Metro Health pays our nurses and the county pays the nurses is approximately, on average, $5 an hour, on average. It differs, obviously, with the level of nurse, but I believe that if we can close that gap and hire nurses at a higher level of pay, that will significantly decrease some of the operational issues that we encounter. And that I believe, would offer us the opportunity to have a much more seamless operation.
Is there
I'm not sure if I
questions?
answered your question, but
Are
I
there
thought it.
questions for Ms. Platten? Yes, Ms. Conwell?
If we increased the salary for the nurses, would that be across the board for all those programs or just specific jail sites?
That would be is for a question, I believe, for the county executive. Our request is that any nurse that's hired for any of the jail facilities is increased so that there's no disparity amongst the full staff. That would be a recommendation that I would make.
So they make 31 now, and you're suggesting adding 5, so that put them about 36, correct?
On average, what I could say is, on average, Metro Health pays $5 more an hour. So what the county decides from there is up to you, up to the county executive. And
Are there any fringe benefits or anything that is going along? Is there safety protocols? Are the medical staff feeling safe? Because this is a little higher level.
so I would say that I don't know the answer to that. We don't supervise the the nursing staff at the county. I do know that we've had conversations with our medical staff at times relative to security, but
Are they
I don't
feeling
have any
safe?
specific detail on formal complaints. It's really the nursing staff, which is, I believe, that's the more robust. Gary might be able to answer for our staff if there's safety complaints from Metro Health staff. You want to address that?
I can say that our number of calls to the dispensary as the inmates are, security staff is constantly short, so the inmates are red zone more frequently where they're locked in their cells longer. We get on average about 30 to 50 calls when they're red zoned to medical for medical complaints, inmates saying they have chest pain, inmates saying they have asthma, wanting to get out of their cells. So it puts a huge burden on the medical staff, not only the county nurses, but also the physicians, the nurse practitioners, because now the officers have to bring these inmates down because of this situation. One of the Metro Health nurses and a county nurse filed a grievance over safety in the intake area, that they felt there wasn't enough officers. There's kind of a chronic complaint with even the physicians and nurse practitioners in the dispensary. The staffing model has been reorganized in the main dispensary. We found out about that after the fact, that they had kind of rearranged the structure of the officers in medical. So there's officers no longer kind of sit on the doors to watch the physicians examine patients. There's kind of a roaming officer that always keeps an eye out, is kind of the new process for medical. So our physicians, our nurse practitioners do feel unsafe from Metro Health, correct?
Has this attention been brought to, this issue been brought to the sheriff's attention?
It has been, correct.
Okay, and how many times?
I'm not
Written
sure.
or just verbal?
Well, I know there was an actual grievance filed, which was addressed, and the county cited on the side of security, saying that they didn't feel that the nurse's concern was validated.
Okay, thank you.
Who made the determination on the county side on this grievance?
I know Ken Mills was involved with that grievance.
Ken, do you, your name's being bantied about
I
here,
don't know that I
so.
want to walk up here now. Ken Mills, Director of Regional Corrections. The grievance he's talking about went through the grievance process, and a lot of the things that are going on are, for example, with that, when we went to the cameras and validated it, and we worked with them, I worked with Kelly to make some changes to make sure that they got what they wanted, that the officers were standing where they wanted, et cetera, down there in intake. I mean, we addressed any safety concerns, and and I also have to add that there's never been an incident. We've not had an issue with our security structure has kept them safe with how we do business. And a lot of times it's misunderstandings because they're used to have somebody sitting there right next to them, and you look at the line of sight and what they have to do. We move them around. So.
Well, I mean, having them.
But I welcome you to come over. I'll be glad to.
We're gonna
Yes,
have
sir.
to do that. Before Mr. Tuma goes, I had asked you earlier about blockades, and it has been suggested, or more than suggested, that things have gone across your desk and stopped as far as hires go.
That's
What
not
say
true.
you?
They don't come to me. That is absolutely not true.
So
Hiring
nothing-
requests do not come through me. They go through the sheriff, and I can't overturn anything the sheriff signs. I mean, I guess it's kind of flattering.
So you've
for
not
him to
blocked
think that.
anything?
No, sir.
Okay.
I've never blocked hiring nurses to come into the jail.
Well, we're having a
into our
hard time
place.
getting them there, so.
Yes, sir. I need them.
Mr. Toomey.
Thank you. I guess the question would be to maybe Ms. Platten, the $5 increase that you might suggest for the pay. I mean, there's not a ton of nurses that you're looking at in this situation. I'm failing to understand why this is such an impediment here. So it tells me there's something like maybe structurally or procedurally wrong, or there's a disconnect between you guys and the director. Is this a relationship that, I mean, we're trying to make this work, obviously. Is there, from your guys' perspective, I mean, can you continue to work with the director moving forward? Because we have to get work done here for people. We're providing a service, as the council president said. And, you know, this seems to be something that is unnecessarily being held up. So from your guys' perspective, Metro Health's perspective, you know, do you feel that you can continue to work under the relationships that you guys have been working under?
Can I just interject?
Just
I'm not going
let-
to answer that question.
Ma'am,
May I-
just let him answer that question.
Okay.
And then you can speak.
Okay.
Again, my experience, I've been at Metro Health now for 2 years. This has been in the jail medical services has been in my portfolio since the day I got there. We have worked very well with Sheriff Pinckney. We've worked very well with George Taylor. Those are our peers contractually. There are operational meetings at times, and there are other decisions that get to us that have been sidestepped, if you will, from the hierarchy that we deal with. My peer, contractually though, like I said, is the sheriff and George Taylor. I don't have often conversations with Ken Mills. It's just, he doesn't have management over the medical staff, nor do I believe he has management over the nursing staff at the main jail. So it's not a relationship that we have when we're talking about operations, particularly at the main jail. Bedford now has, medical services has been given, the responsibility is now in George Taylor's portfolio, and that's who we've been working with on the budget and amendments, and Brian Soleil from the Sheriff's Office has been involved in that as well, and we have no issue whatsoever with that relationship at all.
Mr. Miller. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something to add? I'm sorry.
I did.
Okay, and then Mr.
Maggie
Miller.
Keenan, Office of Budget and Management. I just wanted to clarify on the issue of the pay discrepancy, that we've discussed this with the executive, and the executive has already approved a pay increase to our county nurses to try to minimize that gap. So we've done the financial analysis. We've had all the approvals for well over a month now.
So that's been a month.
At least. I don't know where we are in the process, but I know that it's been
Okay,
approved.
we're going back a year and a half.
You know, that's good, you know, and I've heard about it, but didn't that happen because of the situation we just found ourselves in a few weeks ago? I mean, isn't that why this has occurred?
Oh, absolutely. But I didn't think it was clear in the conversation. Yeah.
This happened because we ended up in a mess.
I don't disagree, but I wanted the council to be aware of the fact that we are addressing the pay.
Believe me, I appreciate that. What was the outcome of the dollar figure
It's approximately $400,000.
per nurse?
No.
How much an hour?
Oh.
I'd like to apply.
Yeah. Maybe barging them in here.
We're gonna have no trouble
Actually, when I did the cost analysis, now Jane, it's at 5, I did it based on $7 an hour for RNs. It was $487,000 for RNs and another $204,000, I think it was for LPNs. That's on my analysis based on the 7 and the 6. Now, if we do it based on the 5, I'm sure it'll be significantly less than that.
I'm guessing it would be wise not to base it on the 5, but that's just my opinion. Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Platten, my question is whether Metro is recommending that the nursing function be subsumed under the county's contract with Metro for health services as opposed to being done separately as it is now.
I'm sorry, Councilman Miller, would you ask me that again?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Platt, my question is whether you think the nursing services should be subsumed under the Metro contract for health services at the jail facilities as opposed to being hired separately by the county as we do now.
So I will tell you that we have offered to have conversations with the county sheriff and his office and his staff and the budget, county budget staff to discuss that as an option. It would need an analysis financially in terms of whether or not the cost would be higher or not. And it would also need an operational review in terms of, is that something that Metro Health operationally can take on, and is that the business that we want to get in? I've offered to have those discussions. I've also offered to the sheriff and to the sheriff and Chief Taylor to hire the nurses for the Bedford facility. And that was met with, it was a welcome response that we've received from them, but the issues of our Metro Health nurses are not in unions. They're not unionized. The county nurses are unionized. And the pay was an issue at the time that these discussions came up. So the offered conversations did not take place, and the offer for hiring Bedford nurses, I was told that that wasn't the route that they wanted to go at that time. I completely understood the response based on the history of the same conversation and the reasons given. Whether or not operationally, I think operationally, obviously, it would be a much more seamless operation, but I do think that there would be some healthy conversations that would have to take place before we were to commit to taking that on.
Okay, that's a helpful response. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Clarifies it.
Can I just, for the record, make one item clear? There are paper trails of conversations about hiring nurses that we were told in writing by Director Mills that the county would not be hiring nurses that we recommended that we needed. So I can certainly provide those correspondences to you after this hearing.
Okay. Anyone? Yes.
A final comment. I guess, my concern is here that we seem to be making this, for some reason, this is I think more difficult than it needs to be. We've got, a public hospital here that we've been working with forever. This business of trying to contract things out to get around that for some reason is not something I understand. Why are we making this more difficult for ourselves? And I guess the reason my antennas are up is because, last year during the budget, Director Mills was pushing a proposal to privatize the medical care at the jail. And what I'm concerned about here is that at the bottom line, we're talking about money and we're not talking about the services that we're providing. And if we're not willing, if we're not willing to spend the money, if we're not able to spend the money, then we shouldn't be in the business of selling these services. One way, one or the other. And I'm very concerned that our decisions are being driven by the effort to not spend money rather than the more important things that should be taken into consideration if we're going to talk about doing something as serious as providing medical care in jails. And I'm not sure everybody understands how serious this issue is. It's not a line item somewhere. It is really a life and death situation that, if not handled properly, could lead to very big trouble. And so, I have to get that off my chest because I think something's standing in the way here that doesn't need to be standing in the way. And I'll leave it at that for right now.
Well, when you had asked if Metro Health could work with the county, we most certainly can. I just want to reiterate with Jane's comment. Sheriff Pinckney and Chief Taylor have been excellent to us. Every time we have any type of concerns, immediate responses, great relationships. I think going forward, if the chain of command is the chief and the sheriff are in charge of medical services, and that's who we are supposed to be dealing with, I most definitely think that we have a great relationship. And I think going forward, if that is made clear, I don't think there's going to be an issue, if that kind of sums that up.
Yes, ma'am.
Just wanted to, I guess I could ask Ken Mills, because, I've heard Jane state, or Director Mills state several times that contractually she is supposed to have conversations with the sheriff and Chief Taylor. So how do you play a role? What exactly role do you play in that part?
I don't. That was my point with it, is their chain of command is through the chief and the sheriff. I take care of security and the operations of the jail. That's my chain of command with them. So we have some inner workings with what goes on operationally inside the jail. But that's what I was getting at with the hiring request, et cetera, was, that's not under my purview.
So you state what you handle again, the operations?
I do the operations of the jail, security.
And so, Mr. Brack? Could you come up too? So then you must have to deal, at some point, Metro must have to deal with Chief Mills or Director Mills for the operations and security. Okay. So
we kind of find out after the fact of things. As I expressed to you before about our redistribution of officers in the main dispensary, Dr. Tallman was very upset that he was not involved in the planning stages of reducing our numbers of officers. And there's no way to know without talking with Dr. Tallman if we see 10 inmates a day or 500 inmates a day. And our staffing should be based on those needs of the inmates. We want to take good care of the inmates. That's what our role is. We can't do that if we don't have the necessary security staff to provide us with that. So we do have to work in collaboration. I guess our frustration is that we don't have any say in anything. Everything is kind of told to us after that. This decision, these high-level decisions are being made, and we're told that this is what's happened. This is what you're gonna do. And as Jane said before, there's a lot of a paper trail here of these kind of conversations, and I feel that some things that have been said aren't truthful today, so I think that it would be helpful to kind of review some of these things. Director Mills does control the security budget, but there's also this imagined authority over health services that kind of happens a lot. And, when we have a good relationship with the sheriff and we okay with the sheriff, and then there's these kind of roadblocks that come up. And so it's very difficult for Metro Health to have to deal with those without having any kind of, we're treated as a third party and not as a partner within the institution. And
so are there regular meetings for when I guess there's keep up with the employees, with the sheriff and
there is. So the sheriff holds meetings. So part of that, and I'll just this is my personal opinion, but the level of disrespect I see in these meetings by Ken Mills to the sheriff, the eye rolling, the body language, the body movements, I've never in my professional career witnessed that. I think that there's a total disrespect for the sheriff's position within the correction center, honestly.
And
I
do
think
you
that's
have
part of it.
meetings with, regular meetings set up with Director Mills?
No.
Okay. So that olive
He
branch.
attends those meetings that we are there at.
Correct. We're all at those meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mills? You're in charge of security, and why were you at the budget?
Because the sheriff was, I requested it, I
Okay.
needed it for the operation.
Okay.
And the sheriff was unavailable, so I presented for him.
I thought, and if you can recollect back to that time when there was, in my opinion, a coup on Metro, I think this council, to a member, made it very clear how we felt, what we expected. And we're hearing some disturbing things today. And on a certain level, I apologize that people are saying things with you here. I don't know if you want to respond. I don't know if it's wise for you to respond. We'll deal with these in a different setting. I think that's more appropriate. But I can tell you that I'm disappointed at how this happened, why we're even here. Metro is going nowhere if any of us have anything to say about it. So if that's not clear as a bell, I don't know what more I can do for you, but that's the way of the West. That's what's going to happen. As Ms. Platten said, that I think any discussions on Metro completely taken over would be a long, drawn-out thing, many moving pieces, parts there. I understand that. But after what we've all just experienced right now, and honestly, legally, and I'm not an attorney, I'll look at my friend here, I think the county is now fully on notice in a public hearing that we are mission critical in the hiring of medical staff at the main jail at Bedford, and evidently not Euclid, but we have problems. How anybody in this county can go out and sell that to a community in Cuyahoga County to come bring your folks here and pay us money, they're beside themselves crazy. We need to clean this up. And if we need to pay nurses more and doctors more or pharmacists more, maybe we need to look at what we're charging to take other folks prisoners. We're not in this to lose money. We're in this to help communities out to save money in the end, but we don't want to lose any money. So if we're going to be upping $7 an hour to draw good nursing, I'm all for that. I would hope that you would be too. But this thing is broken. It needs to be fixed. I look to the sheriff in the back to do that and to report back to this committee when it is fixed, because I think we all see a very broken chain of command here. And I'm not blaming you, but we'll talk privately with your superiors, and maybe we can be helpful in trying to fix this. I told the past administration, I tell this administration, and I don't know if it's clearly heard or certainly clearly believed, but there's not a person up here that wishes ill on any portion of the administration in being successful. We want to be part of that. We want to be helpful. I think our past performance proves it. And this has been a relationship at the jail with Metro that in ways is a little bit historic, in that we couldn't even get them to pick the phone up. And then with Dr. Boutros coming on board and the various other hires that he made, this happened. So we're not going back. So I'm going to put a letter together to my president, who happens to be on the committee, and maybe we can look at starting those laborious discussions with Metro, and hopefully that can work out. And if it can't, where we're at, I'm comfortable with if we do the right things. So we'll talk at a later date. I appreciate your time here. Does anybody else have any other questions or concerns? Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I know it was difficult for some of you to come in here. I don't like having the he said, she said, and finger pointing. It's not productive, but in this situation, evidently, it needed to happen, and we're gonna fix this thing, and hopefully it'll all be better for it. Janine, what else do we have?
No one is signed in for public comment.
Any miscellaneous business? Thank you all. I appreciate it.